In general, I'm not big on ballet sequences or extended dance sequences. I recognize that this is more of a personal preference than a mark against them, and mainly I think it's because I just like lyrics when it comes to music. I'm not huge into instrumentals, and frankly they kind of put me to sleep, which incidentally made it hard for me to appreciate my sister's middle school band concerts. But I found one ballet dance sequence that I actually could appreciate and that keeps me interested the whole way through. Oklahoma isn't my favorite show. It's not even my favorite show done by Roger Hammerstein. On the whole, I'd say it's decent enough depending on the version and who's performing it. It's one of those shows that walks a fine line between being racist, sexist, or just downright unfunny depending on how it's performed. And even though my preferred version is the 1999 performance with Hugh Jackman as Curly, I find the ballet sequence in the 1955 movie to be a bit more enjoyable. Mainly, it's how it's staged and blocked. There's just so much interesting things to be read into it. Whereas the 1999 version leans a bit more into just interesting dancing, which, as I've explained, isn't terribly interesting to me. One thing to know about this version is the ballet dancers don't really look like their movie counterparts. I mean, you can tell right away just by their faces that this isn't the Curly and Lori that we've been seeing for nearly 50 minutes. And on that note, it really says something that the crew felt that they couldn't find anyone who looked enough like the guy playing Judd Fry that they actually had the actor perform his part in the ballet. Also, props to him. He does a really good job. But all in all, this really doesn't distract from the wonderful storytelling told through the dance. They look just enough like their characters for us to know who's supposed to be who. I really like the ballet being used as a way for Lori to explore all of her options. To me, there's three main questions answered with the ballet. 1, what does she think her life with Curly would be like? 2, what does she think her life with Judd would be like? And 3, what would happen if she were to ditch Judd? The first question is answered right off the bat. Her face lights up when she sees Curly. The dance that they perform is romantic, filled with love and enjoyment for one another. We see them still playfully being obtuse in their interactions like we saw when they were discussing the Surrey with the fringe on top, but even still, they're happy together. And they feel no embarrassment as the crowds around them call attention to their love. Let people say that they're in love. Thought of marriage to Curly excites her. It's like a dream come true. I also greatly enjoy the guys sort of dance miming riding horses into the wedding procession. On the one hand, it's kind of hilarious. On the other hand, it's just interesting. And it creates a unique image in my mind. Her second question gets answered almost immediately. We see her face turn to horror as she realizes that the man who lifted her veil was not Curly. It was Judd. Immediately, she backs away, trying to get anyone's attention to take her away from the situation. And this is where the staging really comes into play, in a cool way. Everyone's like a statue, just blindly staring ahead even as Lori tries to plead for them to help her. But they don't hear. No one can save her if she ends up with Judd. Not even Curly can make a move. And even as Judd takes her into what her life would be like with him, she can find no friends amongst those who would hang around Judd. Or at least that's what she thinks. That's how she perceives what her life with Judd would be like. Now, this particular part of the ballet is interesting to say the least. For one, when the saloon girls get brought in, you can clearly hear a version of Ado Annie's song Can't Say No playing. Kinda sort of seeming to suggest that if one were to actually follow Ado Annie's logic in her song, they'd end up as a stripper dancer girl? Or at least that seems to be what the message is. And to be fair, in the 1999 version, the use of the song is a lot less and it's more perverted, as though a girl can like sexual things. But with that version, they seem to be saying that it would take a lot more to become, say, one of the girls on Judd's wall. There's also a few other interpretations for what this scene means to Lori. Does she think that she'd be expected to be like the girls in the porn pictures, dancing and showing off skin to any guy who asks? Or would she be expected to do this just for Judd? Either way, she probably feels that this would be an assassination of her character. That's not who Lori is, and perhaps she fears having to become that if she were to stay with Judd. Then perhaps as she joins the dance with the other girls, she comes to think that maybe it could be a bearable lifestyle as long as she can keep her eyes closed as to who's watching. But then she sees Judd, and at that point, the thought of maybe I could do this disappears. Because at the end of the day, she's still with Judd. A total fail state, to the point where even keeping her eyes closed won't help her. I also have to wonder if the dancing girls in the scene are supposed to seem unhappy because they're portraying the idea of the sort of put upon prostitute as though they they would not have chosen this life had other things not brought them to it. It could be that, or it just could be Laurie's perception of that life being mirrored back to her. Her basically seeing herself in the dancing girls and knowing that she'd be miserable if she became one of them. On a side note, I feel the need to disclaim here that if you earn money from showing off your body, as long as you're doing safely, I've got no problem with it. You should not feel ashamed of it. As long as it's something that you want to do, go ahead and do it. The last question is answered really well, and extremely pointedly. If she were to ditch Judd, he'd essentially be unstoppable. We see this as Curly shoots his gun over and over again, point blank at Judd, but he just keeps walking forward. Gunshots can't kill this beast. Even as crowds try to hold him back, nothing can stop him from taking out his vengeance. They cannot prevent him from killing Curly and eventually carrying Laurie off. One of my favorite imageries of this whole sequence is Judd just dragging Curly's dead and limp body to Laurie like a predator showing off his kill. There's no emotion in Judd's eyes. He's just here to take what he wants, and that's Laurie. I think one of the main reasons why this particular ballet sequence holds my interest whereas others don't is because that there's a lot of storytelling that's relevant to the musical around it being done. We're getting information that we don't necessarily have elsewhere, and we see the effects of these revelations in the act that follows, even to the point of Laurie's fears about Judd taking revenge on Curly almost coming to pass. And my preference for the 1955 version isn't because the 1999 version doesn't have interesting dancing or doesn't answer the same questions. It's more of the staging and what sort of things they focus on. They spend a lot more time showing the horror that Laurie feels would follow from being married off to Judd Fry. Then again, things are kind of weighed in favor of the 1955 version because it's a film. There's just more you can do with film than on stage, where everything needs to flow into each other and you don't really have the ability to do costume or set changes like you could in a movie. But then for everything else, I'm still going to pick up the Hugh Jackman version. For reasons I might bring up later, I feel the 1955 version kind of leans on the not so good side of the fine line that I described at the beginning of the video. While you can still hear echoes of it with the Hugh Jackman version, I feel like they do it a bit better. But hey, that's the beauty of musicals, isn't it? Watching different versions of the same show and finding the ones that you like. Thank you very much for consuming this video, and until next time.